Well, absolutely. And, talk about, going into a country under the guise of humanitarian assistance. Remember when George H.W. Bush was a lame duck president at the end of 1992, he went into Somalia supposedly for humanitarian purposes. And then when Bill Clinton became president, he decides he's going to start to do nation building, which we saw 18 U.S. Army Rangers killed in Mogadishu as a result of that entirely messed up operation. Now, we've been there before. We went into Haiti, I don't know how many times, quote unquote, for humanitarian missions. It isn't funny. Obama, he had no problem with Baby Doc going back to Haiti, but he didn't want the rightful president who was ousted in a U.S. coup, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, returning from exile imposed by the United States and France and South Africa. So we have humanitarian. Look, U.S. Agency for International Development, which is the big humanitarian organization, is nothing more than a CIA front and has been for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we know whose mom, dear old mom, worked for them for many years, and that was Stanley Ann Dunham, Obama, Soetoro, whatever, how many names she had. But
thank you, Marshall. I want to go to Tim, Ben, and JB and others here, and then we'll keep you to the bottom of the hour before our next guest, because I want to spend that next little 5-minute segment on the reactor continual meltdown that's happening. But in your gut, Wayne, watching this for a long time, reporting from Capitol Hill, calling a lot of things before they happen, in your gut, how do you see this ending? What are the different scenarios, and what do you think most probable among them?
Well, I think what we're going to see is a U.S. military, U.S., British, French, and some Italian military involvement in this, what is essentially now a civil war in Libya. I think we're going to see a pro U.S. Western government installed, at least in Benghazi. I don't know how long Gaddafi can hold on. There are reports that he had mercenaries from other countries in Libya. But if this goes to a full-scale military occupation invasion, I think Gaddafi just can't hold out that much longer. He's got basically Tripoli, and now the rebels are moving to reclaim some of the cities his forces took in the last couple of weeks.
So basically the globalist-backed forces started losing, and so the big air power came in to back them.
Yeah, and I think they've got a lot of Ahmed Chalabi. He's a guy we put in Iraq, sort of an international con artist and crook. We've got a lot of Libyans who have lived outside of Libya for a number of years in London and Washington and elsewhere. I think we're probably going to see an attempt to put one of those characters in charge in Libya, and he'll be every bit in our court as that puppet guy we have in Iraq right now.
Well, and of course, Iraq's now one of the only Arab countries actually endorsing this. The Arab League and its support has fallen apart. They were all for a no-fly zone, but not for the bombardment and the special forces there on the ground. But I do see them trying to at least break the country in two from the east, and then continue to launch attacks from the east. Cameron, the British Prime Minister, has basically echoed that, saying that the bombardment is all that's going to be happening, and that the Libyans better, quote, decide this for themselves. So they're telling the rebels, it's up to you now.
Right. Well, I think the rebels probably, now that we've changed the game with Tomahawk cruise missiles, isn't it nice? The United States likes to use standoff weapons at first because it's easy to push a button and kill 50 people on the other end of that Tomahawk cruise missile. But eventually, I think we're going to see some of our ground troops. They're probably already there. We don't know about it yet. And as you mentioned, the heinous crimes being committed in places like Afghanistan against civilians, we're probably seeing that already happen in Libya, except it's not being reported.
Tim in Washington, you're on the air with Wayne Madsen.
Hey, how's it going, Alex? I had a couple points for you real fast, and I was just kind of curious on my math here, because according to my math, that Chernobyl meltdown for 10 days with all the reactors compiled, we were looking at a total of 32 Chernobyl days so far in Fukushima due to its rate of...
Most of the physicists and doctors we've had on have said that this is bigger than Chernobyl, and that there's been a whole bunch of, there's 4 reactors with partial meltdowns, 600,000 plus spent fuel rods sprayed everywhere. Wayne, what's your take on this?
Well, I think obviously we know that just like with Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, what we're getting is being downplayed by the politicians and the very powerful nuclear power industry. This is a very, very powerful lobby because unlike other energy lobbies, they have to deal with the government to get the nuclear material to start these plants. So there's already too close of a relationship between the industry and the government. I think basically what I'm hearing from people in Japan, it is much worse. Of course, the Japanese broadcaster NHK is run by the government, and they've been downplaying a lot of this also. But the private media is telling me that it is much worse. We're talking about the Tokyo metropolitan region, Tokyo, Yokohama. People are now leaving. The Swiss embassy has moved the embassy from Tokyo to Osaka.
So has the U.S. military. What does that tell you about how serious this really is?
That it's very serious.
And they're telling us the fallout's no big deal on the West Coast when the real radiation hasn't even gotten here yet.
Well, and we've had our politicians tell us that 3 Mile Island in 1979, Governor Thornburg of Pennsylvania stated, he said there's no problem. He waited 3 days before telling pregnant women around 3 Mile Island that it's time for you to evacuate when he knew how bad it was 3 days prior. So we've seen this play out so many times. Chernobyl, the cover-up by the Soviet government, helped lead to their demise because they covered that up. But anytime we see these reactor incidents, and well, now we know TEPCO was fudging on the safety inspections because TEPCO is very close to the government oversight.
Yeah, stay there. We're going to come right back. Did that? Do you have anything else to add, Tim, in Washington?
Yes, I got a couple other things, if you don't mind.
Yeah, stay there. Tim, straight ahead. We'll try to cram in a few others, and we'll continue with calls when Tarpley joins us as well. One more segment with Wayne Madsen. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. Here's the headline at Infowars.com. It just went live. Let's send Ann Coulter to Fukushima. I was going to play the clip, but we're almost out of time. I may play it later and tease Tarpley, a big nuclear power fan. But Human Events has the headline, a glowing report on radiation by Ann Coulter. Anyone exposed to excess radiation from the nuclear power plants is now probably much less likely to get cancer. That's, I guess her thought is you aim it directly at a cancer, it hurts that cell, that group of abnormal cells. But general radiation of the whole body in every major study is, I mean, that's not even debated. It massively increases cancer. I mean, even our own government estimates 1 million deaths in the 25 years associated with Chernobyl. But, I mean, this is just brazen propaganda saying the radiation is good for you, Wayne Madsen.
Well, you know, Ann Coulter, have you noticed she hasn't really been on the news recently? So she had to say, he, whatever that is, had to say something to get back into the news cycle. And the more outrageous, of course, that's what the Fox News are all about. The more outrageous, the better.
Well, I don't like to interrupt in the time we've got. I don't like to be mean about how somebody looks because, I mean, I'm not the most beautiful person on the planet. But at the 2004 Republican convention, I was going in the front entrance and waiting for some people and saw her walking in, and I was actually scared. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not joking. I was repulsed because she's so anorexic. You don't see it on TV because it adds weight. That she was having trouble walking, and she looked like a concentration camp victim, like a skull with skin on it, painted with lipstick, and she was actually toddling in like a undead. No, I was like, ugh. I mean, my actual, I've never run into anybody that made me go and actually take a breath in.
Yeah, well, I maybe that's she's so emaciated. We think that's an Adam's apple, maybe her thorax. I don't know, but the or larynx. But I just don't understand people. You know, the broadcaster is supposed to serve the common interest, the public good, and that's definitely not. That doesn't serve any public good. But one thing I'm hearing from people in Japan is it's no good to send money because they have money, they can't buy anything with it. So what they have, nothing off the shelves now in Tokyo and Yokohama, the ramen noodles. So if anybody has friends, family, colleagues over there, this, you know, small packages, so it's not held up in customs, those ramen noodles, powdered milk, AAA, AA batteries. This is what they're out of, and this is what they're in. This is the third largest economy in the world. China, of course, just surpassed them as the second largest. But this is what can happen to an infrastructure when they have a triple disaster like they've experienced.
In closing, Wayne, give us your summation of how bad the disaster really is, the radiation cover-up, and the fact that they're saying this could go on for weeks or months. Headlines about the relief not going well, reactors still smoking, burning, hundreds of thousands of fuel rods, and it seems to be now kind of just going out of the news.
Well, this is what I understand. The chief cabinet secretary, Adama, he cut his teeth politically as an anti-nuclear activist. So what I'm hearing is that there are people in TEPCO and the Nuclear Oversight Agency who don't want to tell him a lot of what's going on because they're afraid he's going to amplify it and make it sound much, well, it is worse than what they're saying, but they don't necessarily trust him, and that's why he's not getting the full picture, and he's the public face of the Japanese government at all these news conferences. So there is a willful attempt by the TEPCO and the nuclear oversight people in Japan to keep critical information, the worst case information from members of the government, including the chief cabinet secretary.
Well, it's not a good sign when the U.S. military, U.S. embassies, French, German, pull out, when foreign airlines won't fly into Tokyo, when the fleet raced away last Monday, when Fukushima 3 blew up, and now when the head of the plant itself breaks down and cries and says, basically, I can't lie to you, this radiation is going to kill people. That shows you what's really happening.
Right, and we have to be worried here about the radiation that's coming over the West Coast, because we know that based on what we saw with the Gulf oil disaster, how our own government downplays the health effects of these natural disasters. The other thing I want to add quickly is I'm afraid we may see the international bankers, these vampires, vultures, and vermin now try to play this up as much as they can to try to just put Japan, the third largest economy in the world, under their firm control.
Meanwhile, a headline up at Drudge, also on Infowars.com. White House works quietly to squelch the photos. They've already released photos of them killing kids. So, man, Wayne Madsen, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back with Dr. Tarpley. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.